Hello everyone, welcome to the 170 Literary and Jury Charge. We're going to start out with a small selection from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and this is on Lower Your Tolerance to Stress. Okay, ready? It seems that we have it backward in our society. We tend to look up to people who are under a great deal of stress, who can handle loads of stress, and those who are under a great deal of pressure. When someone says, I've been working really hard or I'm really stressed out, we are taught to admire, even emulate their behavior. In my work as a stress consultant, I hear the proud words, I have a very high tolerance to stress, almost every day. It probably won't come as a surprise that when these stressed out people first arrive at my office, more often than not, what they are hoping for are strategies to raise their tolerance to stress even higher so they can handle even more. Fortunately, there is an important law in our emotional environment that goes something like this. Our current level of stress will be exactly that of our tolerance to stress. You'll notice that the people who say, I can handle lots of stress, will always be under a great deal of it. So if you can teach people to raise their tolerance to stress, that's exactly what will happen. They will accept even more confusion and responsibility until again their external level of stress matches that of their tolerance. Usually it takes a crisis of some kind to wake up a stressed out person to their own craziness. A spouse leaves, a health issue emerges, a series of addiction takes over in their life, something happens that jolts them into a search for a new kind of strategy. It may seem strange, but if you were to enroll in the average stress management stress workshop, what you would probably learn to raise your tolerance is to stress. It seems that even stress consultants are stressed out. What you want to start doing is notice your stress early before it gets out of hand. When you feel your mind moving too quickly, it's time to back off and regain your bearings. When your schedule is getting out of hand, it's a signal that it's time to slow down and reevaluate what's important rather than power through everything on the list. When you're feeling out of control and resentful of all you have to do, rather than roll up your sleeves and get to it, a better strategy is to relax, take a few deep breaths, and go for a short walk. You'll find that when you catch yourself getting too stressed out early before it gets out of control, your stress will be like the proverbial snowball rolling down the hill. When it's small, it's manageable and easy to control. Once it gathers momentum, however, it's difficult, if not impossible, to stop. There's no need to worry that you won't get it all done. When your mind is clear and peaceful and your stress level is reduced, you'll be more effective and you'll have more fun. As you lower your tolerance to stress, you will find that you'll have far less stress to handle, as well as creative ideas for handling the stress that is left over. Okay, I've got some jury charge. The subject is weighing evidence. Ready? Members of the jury, you are the sole judges of the truthfulness of the witnesses and of the weight that is to be given to their testimony. It is not your duty to accept the testimony of witnesses blindly and follow it passively, but it is your duty to consider it with care, subject it to your experience and judgment, and accept it only so far as it appeals to you as being reasonable and true. While it is your duty to accept as true the uncontradicted testimony of an unimpeached witness giving with apparent fairness and candor, still you are not obliged to accept the testimony of a witness as true merely because there is no testimony contradicting it. If it contains contradictions or improbabilities which, standing alone or in connection with other evidence in the case, furnish reasonable grounds for believing that it is not true, You are at liberty to so regard it. If you find and believe from the evidence that any witness has willfully or knowingly testified falsely with respect to any material matter in the case, you are then at liberty to disregard the testimony of such witness with regard to other matters, excepting insofar as such witness is corroborated by other credible testimony. But you are the sole judges of the truthfulness of such a witness, as well as any other, and you may believe or disbelieve his testimony with respect to other matters, accordingly as you deem it worthy or unworthy of belief. You may take into consideration the interest of the witnesses in the result of the action, their appearance upon the witness stand, their demeanor in the courtroom, their relation to the parties, if any, and all the facts and circumstances in connection with the trial, and give to the testimony of each witness just such weight and credibility as you think it deserves. You are not to count the number of witnesses and render your verdict in accordance with the majority of them, but to weigh the testimony and render your verdict in accordance with the truth. It is the law that during the first 12 hours of your deliberations, you can only render a verdict by unanimously agreeing upon the verdict. However, if you fail to agree during the first 12 hours, the law permits you after that to render a verdict that has been agreed upon by 5/6 of your number. In case you render a unanimous verdict, it should be signed by your foreman as such. But if you render a 5/6 verdict, it should be signed only by those concurring in the verdict and not by your foreman, unless he be one concurring, in which case he will sign the same as the rest and not as foreman. You will select one of your number as foreman when you retire to the jury room, and when you have agreed upon the verdict, bring it into court if the court is in session. If the court is not in session, seal up your verdict, give it to your foreman, and bring it in when court next convenes. If you agree upon a verdict when court is in session, you will not seal it up. Okay, I have an article here, Where the Heart Is. Here we go, ready? A brave and dear friend of mine adopted a troubled 15-year-old girl whose life had been one long saga of abandonment and insecurity. As the child's 16th birthday approached, my friend wondered how to make it a special, sweet 16th without appearing to buy her new daughter's love. When the big day finally arrived, the first present the birthday girl opened was a simple tin canister hand-painted with flowers and the words, "One for each year I missed." Inside were 15 small gifts individually wrapped and numbered. Each was appropriate to an age, beginning with a baby's tiny music box and ending with a box of scented stationery. It was a moment of healing for this new family as the once angry, sullen child opened each small token with quiet wonderment and joy. No one had to worry about the proper thing to say. Both the pain of the past and the hope for the future were acknowledged. And then my other article is called Good Neighbor Award. Okay, for goodness above and beyond the call of duty. Here we go. For goodness above and beyond the call of duty, for the past 4 years, my husband, Walt Neckkirk, has been celebrating his birthday by making and giving away rocking horses to hyperactive and arthritic children. The rocking horse he designed originally for a slightly hyperactive grandson's second birthday doesn't tip over. When Walt discovered that the horse was good therapy for hyperactive children, he began donating them to institutions to help kids who weren't as fortunate as those in his own family. The first gifts went to the Ronald McDonald House, the pediatrics unit of Johns Hopkins Hospital, and the Kennedy Institute for Handicapped Children, all in Baltimore. Walt began receiving letters of endorsement from the public relations departments of these places, quoting medical personnel, all impressed with the safety of Walt's motion toy. Soon after, Walt donated a rocking horse to our assistant minister's 3-year-old daughter who suffered from juvenile arthritis. The little girl's physical therapist thought it was the best thing for her, prompting Walt to contact the Arthritis Foundation of Hagerstown, Maryland. Now he builds 2 sizes of the rocking horse and gives them to arthritic children whose names are supplied by the foundation. Childhood should be happy, Walt explains. When little kids hurt, they're not happy. If my horses can make them smile and help them physically, then it is worth it. Neat story there. Okay, I'm going to read another jury charge. This is on assault and battery. Okay, don't forget SAUB is the brief for assault and battery. Here we go. Where an unlawful trespass is being committed upon the property of another, the owner may lawfully use the amount of force which is necessary under these circumstances for the protection of his property, either real or personal. However, he will be guilty of assault if he uses excessive force or any force after the necessity therefore is past. To justify a resort to force in defense of property, the danger should be such as to induce one exercising reasonable and proper judgment to interfere to prevent the consummation of the injury. Throwing a stone which is capable of inflicting grievous bodily harm at a person, even though such person is a trespasser, constitutes an assault if the purpose was to commit grievous bodily harm. Ordinarily, one person is in possession of premises lawfully and who has requested or ordered another to leave, whom he had a right to do so or to so request, may lawfully use as much force as is necessary to move such other, after allowing him a reasonable time to depart, and the trespasser may not resist if only reasonable force and agencies are used or employed in making such rejection. This right applies to any property lawfully in possession. However, anyone ejecting a trespasser will be guilty of assault if he uses more force than is necessary, as when he uses a dangerous or deadly weapon, unless the trespass is made with hostile intent and actual force. The general rule is that the owner may use only such force as is necessary to eject the trespasser. A man may not use a deadly weapon to resist a mere trespass, but he may resist the trespass with sufficient force. If while so resisting, he has reasonable ground for believing that he himself is in personal danger, then he may use a weapon to defend himself and his property. It is clear that a man has no right to commit an assault with intent to do great bodily harm to another for a wrong that he does not have reasonable ground to believe to be dangerous to himself. If a person honestly believes or has reason to believe that he is in great peril and that great bodily harm is about to be inflicted upon him, he has a right to act under such well-grounded apprehension and may use a weapon even though the danger does not, in fact, exist. However, in the absence of a felonious invasion of one's property, that is, in the absence of an invasion with intent to commit the crime of felony thereon, one does not have the right to inflict serious bodily injury in the defense of property interests alone. The defendant in this case, after requesting the plaintiff to leave the premises, had the right to use reasonable force to eject him, but no more force than was reasonably necessary. If in protecting his land from trespass only, he intentionally inflicted grievous bodily harm upon the plaintiff and was not himself in reasonable fear or danger or bodily harm to himself, then he committed a wrongful assault upon the plaintiff. Okay. I have a story here, and this is called A Part for Chris. He was born with a big handicap, but he had two things going for him, a loving family and a lot of heart. When Marion Burke discovered she was pregnant again at 39, there seemed no reason for anything but rejoicing. Her husband, Frank, was a New York City police lieutenant. Their teenagers, Ellen and Annie, and their 11-year-old son, J.R., were such an all-American kids that they got jobs as child actors and models. But a few hours after the birth in August of 1985, Marion's longtime pediatrician stood at her bedside with an expression Marion had never seen before. "Your son is going to be different," she said. The words cut through Marion and Frank like a knife. They held hands tightly as the doctor went on. Christopher would be retarded. He would probably never be able to read, and he might not even be able to feed himself. You should probably consider institutionalizing him right away before you get too attached, the doctor said. Marion and Frank couldn't imagine it. Devastated but determined to take care of their son, they took him home. Gradually, the Down syndrome, as the condition is called today, became evident. His speech was slurred and garbled. He was 2 years old before he took his first wobbly steps. It would be years before the doctors realized that the learning ability of an infant with Down syndrome can be raised by exercises and stimulation. But the Burke family did just that from the start. His sisters, Annie and Ellen, sat with the 2-year-old in front of a mirror, playing a game to help him talk. Eyes, they would say, moving Chris's hand toward his eyes. Nose, mouth. They repeated slowly, taking his hand from feature to feature as he gazed at their reflections, attempting to repeat after them. Whenever he got a word right, they showered him with praise. The more applause he got, the happier he became. J.R. worked on his younger brother's coordination. To Chris, J.R. became the patient hero who helped teach him to swim and would play catch without getting annoyed, even when his partner missed the ball a dozen times in a row. J.R. and his friends took Chris along to play basketball. They let him try to dribble and shoot by himself. Chris was 4 when his parents entered him in New York's Kennedy Child Study Center. One morning he astonished his mother by bringing her a box of Cheerios and saying, "Look, here's my name," then picking out the letters CHRIS. Although he made steady progress in reading, math gave him more trouble. When JR tried fruitlessly to teach him the intricacies of money and making change, Chris sighed and, taking a line from Popeye, said, "I am what I am, JR." Then one afternoon, when Chris was 8 years old, he found a decade-old box of glossy professional photographs taken of JR and Ellen and Annie when they were child actors in television commercials. Eagerness shining all over his freckled face, he haltingly announced, "I want to do that. I want to be on TV too." Frank and Marion engaged looks, their hearts aching. It was against their nature to tell Chris that he couldn't do something, and yet it would be wrong to let him build up false hopes. Marion searched for the words. "I don't know if there would be any parts available for you, dear," but she couldn't, or she hadn't reckoned on the sunny self-confidence behind Chris's smile. "Well, you never know," he said finally. Chris never forgot his dream. Over and over he practiced lip-syncing his favorite tunes and dancing whenever the teacher put on a record or some song. He got his first part in a school Christmas pageant playing a shepherd. His first speaking part was in the Emperor's New Clothes. His line was, "Ha ha, what a joke." He practiced until he was practically saying it in his sleep. I want to be an actor, he announced afterward. Chris completed his special schooling at age 21. His family helped him search for a regular job, but dead end followed dead end. Chris was more than sharp enough to know that the world was shutting him out. He tried a sheltered workshop, but putting small items into boxes and sealing them made him terribly unhappy. He left after 2 weeks. Then his sisters lent a hand. Both now had families of their own and saw how careful and loving he was with their daughters, especially with Ellen's daughter Nora, who was confined to a wheelchair with Rett syndrome, a far more severe handicap than Chris's. Ellen went to talk with Nora's teacher and asked him about the possibility of using Chris as a volunteer. Soon Chris was helping out with Nora's class at New York City's PS 138, a school for children with severe disabilities. In his heart, though, Chris was still set on going to Hollywood. He had won first place in a local lip-syncing contest, but that, as his family pointed out, was a long way from Hollywood. At last, JR had a brother-to-brother talk with him. Chris, you've got to forget this Hollywood stuff, he said. It's never going to happen. But it could happen, Chris knew. When he was 19, he had seen a TV program that featured a 10-year-old actor named Jason Kingsley who had Down syndrome. Chris had written to Jason, congratulating him. Jason's mother, Emily Pearl Kingsley, responded with a warm note. Later, the Burks and the Kingsleys met. Emily Kingsley remembered Chris when she was asked to recommend an actor with Down syndrome for a TV movie being made as a pilot for a series by writer-producer Michael Braverman. Jason was too young for the part, but Chris might be perfect. So it was that a Warner Brothers casting executive called the Burks. Marion answered the phone. Would Chris be interested in an audition? Let me ask him, Marion replied. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and I will finish this in our next literary and jury charge class. Okay, have a great day.